Sacrifice or compromise? Ooh. Is one better than the
Mm.
other? Can you have both of them? Are they good? Are they bad? What happens when you can't choose, right? Is it always on the same person to do? We're going to get into it and so much more. It's been a good one. I think you in for a good one here. We believe that. We appreciate y'all rocking with us. Let's get into the episode.
Hey everyone, welcome to Sum It Up with the Summoners. I'm Katoya,
Damon.
and we are the hosts of Sum It Up with the Summoners. If you're joining us for the first time, the 95th or whatever this is time, welcome back. We're glad to have you. Glad to know that you're listening. We don't know who you always are, but we know you're out there. So we appreciate you. Thanks for joining.
Definitely, definitely. We are excited that you're here with us today. We've got a good one coming your way here, talking about sacrifice versus compromise.
We've all been there.
Sacrifice versus compromise. How similar are they? How different are they? When do you need to get into one or the other? We're going to dive into it. Healthy dialogue coming your way right now. Let's jump right into it. We want to start with the quote here.
Yeah, let's
Why don't
start
you
with
give
the
us
quote.
a
This is
framework?
I kind of I feel like the quote's gonna take the whole episode, but it is a great quote. Sacrifice versus compromise. Sacrifice mostly means that one person is doing the heavy lifting, giving up things that are important to them, or adjusting their values time and time again. With a compromise, two people will be trying to figure something out. With a sacrifice, one person will be asked to give something up.
So I guess how much or how little do we agree or disagree with that is where we could start with it. Right? Do
Yeah,
you think it's a quality definition of either?
I do. I do think that sacrifice could not just be one person's sacrifice, because I think that the whole reason why you have to have a sacrifice is because there's differences. So while, because let's just start to say that when we're thinking about sacrifice and compromise, you're thinking about bigger situations, right? Like not just like dinner or something, but you're thinking about a heavier decision that you're about to make or plan for in your life. And there's an element of sacrifice. Um, there's definitely sacrifice for the person who has to like do something different or be accepting to something. Um, but I do believe that even in sacrifice, it can still affect both people. So that's my only disagreement here.
Well, I think in both of them, both people. There are instances where both people have to sacrifice. I don't think it's always just one person sacrificing. It could be a thing where, um, I don't know. I'm trying to think of maybe cats. You're allergic to cats, right? And another person loves cats. They have two cats. You move it into this house, and so there's this element. This isn't a great example, but I do think there's times when both people have to sacrifice for the sake of one. When you're in a relationship, when you're in a marriage, there are times when, and maybe this is more of a compromise. Maybe as we're talking this out, is it? I think an element when you talk about sacrifice is that it feels like only one person has to give something up. I don't know. Maybe it's 35 years in. Sometimes I just feel like there's been situations where both parties have to give something up. And I think for myself, with the definition, I think it's a quality definition. I think giving something up is my first thought when I think of sacrifice, and then two people bringing something to the table. Bringing something to the table is more of a compromise to me. I think those are my first reactions, thinking about the difference between what is a sacrifice and what really is a compromise.
Yeah. I do agree. I do think that sacrifice, all I keep thinking about is our current situation. I guess we could share a little bit about like, just making decisions. And we've mentioned it before on our podcast about like, pursuing different things. We work because we need to work to provide for our family, but neither of us are in jobs that we desire to be in long term. However, we still need to provide for our family, so therefore work is still done. I think that's a compromise in and of itself. Every day you have to compromise and do what you need to do, to take care of your family. And I think that's an even bigger statement at some point, because you're thinking about parents making sacrifices for this, betterment of their family or their children as a whole. So that's just like team sacrifice, we take one for the team. Darn kids will never know anything about that. But the reality is, like, when you that's our situation. And so there's been times in our marriage where, someone's kind of sticking it through while the other person tries to pursue, or we both go after it and take the risk of that, right? So I think through this type of, scenario, because I think, well, the sacrifice is, that there's always a risk in the decision to go and do something that doesn't guarantee you, what you've once had. Let's say it's financially. Are you okay with this conversation?
I'm great.
And so then there's sacrifice to be had, someone staying, working.
What are you saying is being sacrificed for someone who is kind of wrestling with this?
Like on what end?
You're talking money, you're talking about comfort, you're talking...
I think it's all.
You're talking
but
the mindset of quote-unquote stability. Like,
I think it's all a sacrifice. And I think it's because I think financial brings into all the other factors, right? Because you can have stability and comfort when you know that you're guaranteed, income, if you will. But what feels like a sacrifice too is the person who's going to pursue something and giving it their all. Like, they're still giving an element of sacrifice to try. But I think that gets a little hard because it's like, well, is that really sacrifice? Because you're still getting a chance to do what you're trying to do. So it's really still impacting the opposite person, to feel that need for sacrifice. But it doesn't necessarily, it's complicated because it could be a compromise as well, depending on, the decision you arrive to.
Yeah, I think every healthy relationship has ebbs and flows of when sacrifice is there and when compromise is there. I think I would assume that every, healthy marriage, one person or the other, both people at the same time, they've made sacrifices for the love of their partner or for the benefit of their relationship or, family or whatever the case may be. And that is, where, if you've been with us for a while on this podcast, that communication is king, that you can't over communicate. Those mantras there really have to be aligned, where you really have to sit down and have not just one, but multiple, honest, vulnerable, honest, maybe tear-jerking conversations, maybe processing sessions, brainstorm, sit-downs, webs, all type of stuff. Because depending on the level of the sacrifice, depending on the level of the risk, I thought you brought up a really good word, the risk, just stay in the job sector for a section coming out of a pandemic. Our mindsets, I think, as humans has continued to change and transform about what does stability really mean, right? In the blink of an eye, right? The whole thing changed, and now how there's more. I'm not going to get into it deep, but what I'm saying is big picture, staying with work. It really is a really interesting aspect of relationships. I don't think it talked about enough. Is the wrestling, is the toiling of compromise and sacrifice in order to maintain a healthy relationship.
Yeah, and sacrifice, you think, well, is it good or bad? I don't know if it necessarily has to. I think it can be both. It depends on the dynamic of whatever the situation is, because while my mind first probably goes to like financial, work-related type of sacrifice, there's like mental health sacrifice. There's
all types. Lifestyle. All type of
preferences,
things.
Lifestyle. There's personality difference.
If I was
sacrifice.
smoking and you didn't smoke, we either were going to make a compromise or a sacrifice.
Ooh,
whole lifestyles can change.
Well,
so
go
many
outside.
things,
That's the compromise.
I think for myself, good or bad, I think what makes a sacrifice specifically, and we can move to compromise more deeply in a second, is if the people on the same page, it's a good sacrifice. Win or lose, I think if they are not on the same page and somebody is maybe forced or coerced or whatever into making the sacrifice, I think win or lose it's a bad sacrifice. That's how I personally feel about it. So if Couture and I want to start a bakery and we're on the same page, right? And we make sacrifices, boom, 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 but we both feel good about it. We're both committed to it. We have communicated about it. Win or lose, success or failure on the business, I think it was a risk worth taking as a sacrifice. If she coerced me and pulls my arm and I give in and I sacrifice,
That's
yada,
me.
yada, yada. Well, I want to take the Hollywood trope and just be the guy always as the bad guy.
Twist his arm.
And twist my arm and make it happen, right? And we weren't never on the
probably
same
would try.
page, but I still sacrificed whatever, then I think it was a bad sacrifice. That's how my mind.
That's
I don't
fair.
think it's the result necessarily for myself. I think it's more so the
why,
the
the
collaboration.
how, or like the reason why, I think for me, that's what I think. Because naturally, I do believe that sacrifice feels negative. But it doesn't, it depends on like what's the end goal of it. Because when I do think of compromise, I feel more of we're on two different sides of the table, but we work ourselves to the middle. And so sacrifice feels a little more heavier one-sided.
Sure, yeah.
And it means that you're choosing to do this, but hopefully you're choosing because you want what's best for someone else, or I'll set back on this so that this can happen. I'm sacrificing,
I think, yeah.
And I don't know if I believe that's necessarily a compromise, because in my real opinion of a sacrifice is to give up complete preference of what you desire, and you just say, okay, like I still really want that, but I'm a push it back. I'm sacrificing this for whatever.
I think there are numerous times Katoya has made a sacrifice for myself or for our family, but the first one that comes to my mind just hit me. In my opinion, I think it was when we were graduating college and we were going to move to Atlanta. Now, we were on the same page about moving to Atlanta, but if you remember, the timelines were different. And we both, I won't speak for you, but I felt strongly about moving that summer. Mind you, to be very clear and very honest, she was pregnant. We hadn't specifically landed any work. We didn't land any housing. I mean, there's a bigger story to it that if you've been with us for a while here. Uh-huh.
You're like, it's a bigger story.
Yeah, no, those are
that's
nuggets.
pretty much
Right.
the biggest meat of
for
the
sure.
nugget.
We were helping, long story short, I don't want to leave anybody out if it's your first time with us. We were coming with about 15 to 20 other people to help start a church plant here in Atlanta. And so the timeline, had graduated college and just felt strongly about it, and she was like, okay, I trust you, young husband. I trust you. And I won't speak for you. I don't think it was a regret. I do think, there were hard times for sure. Some good times, some great times.
I would not do it again.
Sure.
But
sure.
It did happen.
It did happen.
And we were fine.
And I wouldn't counsel somebody necessarily to do that way either. Gotta be honest here, right?
Yeah,
but now
sure.
where we are, that was a sacrifice out of the grace and compassion and the trust, putting her trust in me. We had been married maybe 2 years tops at that time, right? We're both less than 25, right? About to become parents,
even married too.
right? And so, I knew it was less. I was just easy math.
We were.
Anyway, and so that's just one thing. Just adding some meat, adding some personal experience on that.
That was sweet.
You talk about sacrifice.
There's countless though in between our marriage, just because you constantly are, but you're leaning into the, thoughts of someone else, or to the, the decision, trusting. We often say, are things high faith or high wisdom? Like, are you going out just like, man, I believe, or is it like, no, there's like real evidence,
practical, tangible.
And to be honest, I land more on the practical, tangible, and Damon is more high faith. So I feel, would you agree or disagree?
I would agree with that, yeah.
And I feel like we do have to work ourselves a lot in the middle, because that's two different perspectives.
And even changing words, just to give a little more context on the, I'm using air quotes, realistic, optimistic side is another way to paint it as well.
Yeah, I'm definitely more of a realist. And people say that, like, yeah, I'm a realist, and that makes an optimist feel like I'm real.
Yeah, it's preference and perspective,
But
right? It's
there is like, but I would like to feel like, I mean, I'm optimistic, like I do think the best. I try, but realistically, I do err more on the, we just got into a pretty large discussion about this yesterday on our
that was a
different
sweet way to put it.
perspectives. We got into quite a big argument about, these two different perspectives that we hold and how that impacts, the way we see things. And this was a very small situation that was just about a dryer and fixing things. But then that same line of thinking plays ourselves into
So many
our
other
bigger
contexts.
decisions. And so we have to, and the argument the other day, yesterday,
I think so, yeah.
yeah. Ooh, my stomach is growling. The argument yesterday really brought us to a deep discussion, which is one of the biggest things about a compromise is, like Damon was saying, there's you got to keep having these rounds of conversation. You got to be willing to talk about it. Now, granted, it didn't start as a calm conversation. I had reached a maximum, and I just kind of lashed out. Damon becomes defensive to my lash out, and then we start pretty much arguing. I say arguing, but we're like the kindest arguers. So you ain't saying nothing.
I'm just listening.
I think
Go
we're
ahead.
really great arguers. Like if somebody watches, they'd be like, "Man, that was really successful." Like you were still kind for the most part. And shout out to Damon for creating that culture in our relationship. But we end up working our way back to really listening to each other. And I think even in compromises, that's where you need to come back to, because the compromise could just be differences of opinion, and you work to figure out how they weld best together.
Yeah, no, very true. I want to go back to that quote for a second as we get more into compromise. With the compromise, the quote said, with the compromise, two people will be trying to figure something out. I do think there are times when sacrifices have been made, but both of us have been trying to figure something out. It's really, let's get into semantics. I think, again, why I go back to good and bad. You can have a good compromise, you can have a bad compromise. Compromises aren't necessarily always good either. I do think, though, that you can sacrifice and both people be trying to figure something out. What's interesting about compromise is that sometimes it can be the longer route. Sometimes it can be the longer journey because both people are like, all right, we're putting my chips in. You'll get your chips in, but we're putting my chips in as well. So it ain't got to be 50-50, but it ain't going to be 90-10. And so sometimes, specifically with our son who's 12 going into the 8th grade, he just got his first cell phone. If you've been keeping up with us the last few weeks, it's been a journey for us as parents and having that dialogue and those conversations. And, we found compromise. We gave it to him for the last 3 days to try it out at school, and now he's got it now. We've got perimeters. I mean, we could get a whole nother episode about it. It's all type of thing. He signed a contract. Like you know what I'm saying? It's because it's a big thing, right? It's a big thing for us as parents. It's a big thing for us with daughters watching their older brother. And it's a big thing for him as a young man in this 21st century. And so anyway, compromise sometimes I find it quite intriguing. It can be the longer journey to having a decision made.
It is true. And sacrifice can sometimes just be the quicker option. You get what you want. And I say, no, or one way or the other, possibly. Mm-hmm. And you kind of like win.
Like sex.
Sometimes I win.
Sacrificing sex.
I win. No, that's just called serving and nice. No. But
just be sleepy.
I do believe a compromise can be revisited.
Yes.
Right? Yes. I mean, I think sacrifice should be revisited, but I think sacrifice then becomes a compromise. And then, like you sacrificing, like, I don't really like that. All right, well, let's compromise.
Oh, so you're saying there's evolutionary opportunities in either.
Yeah.
Or one or the other.
But I really think the sacrifice only transitions into a compromise. And then I think you can go for rounds of what the compromise continues to.
You don't think compromise can move up to sacrifice? Is that what you're saying?
I don't think it should. I think it should move into to natural order.
Natural order, interesting. Okay.
Like the more you keep compromising, the more this should like begin to it should evolve into working.
Do you think
Like
that
it shouldn't be
compromise is
looked
better
at-
than sacrifice? Is that
Yes, I believe the compromising is
Do
better than
you?
a sacrifice.
Huh.
I thought that's what we were saying.
No, that's not what we were saying.
Yeah. I think sacrifice.
More times than not.
Yes,
Let's use the
because I believe
caveat.
that
More times than-
sacrifice has a negative connotation that
Does it?
I'm just
I agree.
foregoing something.
It does have a negative connotation. I agree there. That is true.
Well, to give up complete preference is my definition of sacrifice.
I hear you. Yes. And that's always bad. That's more times than not bad.
It's only not bad when it is because you want something else for someone else.
For example, and I'm just throwing out the hypothetical. I do not want a pet, y'all. I do not want a dog. I don't. But I am quite confident I'm going to sacrifice perfectly fine in the next.
You don't think it's a compromise?
No.
I think it's a compromise because you started like trying to find what dog was best.
Because that was me working my bones of 35
That's called
years.
a compromise, though.
That's not a compromise. That's just me playing the long game. And so I'm content moving in the direction of sacrificing my preferences, 1 out of 5, of having a dog essentially in the next year or two, whatever.
This is a good example.
And so, okay.
Well, I think it's because you see the benefit of it in everyone else who wants to experience it.
Yes.
So like that's what I'm saying. Sacrifice isn't bad, I believe, when
Okay.
you want something for the opposite party.
Okay.
You're like, you know what? I'll take it on my chin to just give into this
Sure.
so that it brings you
benefit and
joy.
value to
or
others.
like it's the other person in mind.
Yes.
Because
Service.
maybe it's not as deeply rooted or seated for you or so. But this is a really good topic, y'all. So I mean, like as you can tell, we're kind of like navigating through what we think through sacrifice and compromise. Definitely want to know some more thoughts about what you're feeling about this because is sacrifice good, bad, or both? Or do you see compromise as the worst or more challenging? I do think it's more challenging because it takes more work to determine what the compromise is.
Yeah, it's really fascinating.
You don't think that?
No, I'm not. I'm really intrigued about the concept. It's really something I don't hear a lot in my circles. I'll be specific. Maybe y'all talking about it wherever you at a lot of elements of relationships, but they are so part of our relationships. Like just as humans, sacrifice and compromise is just a huge part. I mean, from something as little like what's for dinner to something as medium as taking a 10-year anniversary trip to something as large as I want kids, I don't want kids. Like there's so many times we're making decisions in our relationships where we are sacrificing and compromising, and being aware of that and being aware of how well that's going for both parties as becoming one. I think it means a lot.
I think it does mean a lot. And I actually believe if we look through these lenses a little bit more frequently, then we'd be better at considering one another. Because naturally it's what I want. It's, what I think is best. It's this is the way this should be. But what if you, switch that to say, I understand that this is not what you want. Thanks for like meeting me here in the middle.
Sure.
Sure. Let's give it a go and let's see. Oh man, I know you didn't want tacos tonight, but what if we added the shrimp? Would that be a good? What if we made a bowl?
Yeah.
Like I know this seems so soft, but it starts with those smaller decisions
do.
to have that perspective to
Yes.
think a little bit more considerable.
Yes.
Say the word.
Considerate?
Considerably.
Yeah.
Considerably
Yep.
for the other person, because
Yeah.
naturally we just feel like, oh, I'm entitled to this decision and my idea and my thought.
Yeah.
But understanding your partner's perspective to see how it might be impacting them.
We love TV. We love good TV, right? And so it's just funny to think about how often we are sacrificing and compromising for good TV. I'm using an example I feel is quite relatable for everyone because I think about how many people, I'm not going to go in gender, how many people have watched a rom-com they haven't wanted to watch? How many people have went to a Super Bowl party that they want to go to?
That's a small
right?
thing.
How many times have, and for,
You're doing that because this like
right,
that's value
right.
back.
But
or
all those
brings
things, I
them
think
joy.
you brought up a good point of like if we're being more intentional with our thoughts of man, like okay, sure, they suck at putting the dishwasher and the dishes correctly in the right way, but the level of consideration and compromise, they have given me and this family, has really been crushing it. I think it just continues to fight for positive thoughts about our partner, positive thoughts about our relationship, to continue to fight towards that when we slow down. Now, maybe y'all just in the negative and y'all got some process to work on. that you could be in that season.
You could be, but if you take a mindset,
step back
and say, you know what, this is harder for you, or
he doesn't like doing the laundry.
I know he doesn't like this, and that doesn't mean it's okay that he doesn't like to do it.
Sure.
But realistically, we all have something that's not our greatest thing. Like, that's kind of how we got into our argument the other day, too. It's like, I'm sure I'm not great at everything you wish I was great. Like, we would love probably more decoration in our house. Right. I don't know. Heck, what you probably wish you had, I probably wish was in me, too. Dang. Yeah, that is true. That sucks for both of us.
That's a whole 10-minute segment right there on both of us right there. Like, no, I want those qualities.
Yeah, I want that, too.
I do.
But I don't have it.
I ain't got it.
And I'm sorry. But you know what? Check out what I do know. Check out what I do have.
Watch my effort as I try to get better.
Look at me trying. Because that's a real thing. So instead of coming with the heavy hand of, we just turned this whole episode into more positive spin than it had to have. But I do think that's important because I thought this when you kept saying this is not something that people really talk about. But I do think people talk about it. But they don't realize how they could see it on the other side. It's more of a, he just don't do. Or she I keep asking. Or instead we think, what is the compromise? Like how do I meet this person in the middle? I said it, I say it. Teaching has made me a better parent.
Come on.
Like I would like slightly get it tattooed, like 22 different kids. You can group about most of them into 5 different groups where they all need 5 different types of love. But I think about that when I think about meeting their needs, right? I have to meet my kids differently. I just got the report cards and it's just all these 3 different teacher evaluations of strengths and weaknesses. I was like, dang, these my kids. They right. They got it. Yeah. They nailed it. I know it. I don't need to give her that. I need to give her that. I should give him this. He doesn't need this. And the same thing goes when we're looking at one partner. How do I meet you in the middle? You are not a complete being, unfortunately, because we're just not. How do I love you knowing that this is your weakness? How do I love you knowing that this is your strength? How do I support you? And if you both equally think in that way, then you're thriving because you're both being considerate to whatever changes and sacrifice and compromise that may need to take place.
Yeah.
I'm dropping the mic.
Listen.
That's good spin on a tough topic.
Sometimes you got to preach to yourself. Listening to others, being thoughtful of others. I think a huge piece of it just goes back to just the dialogue, right? Like we could always, if y'all were doing a drinking game on our podcast, see how many times Damon and Couture are gonna bring up communication. Well, it is one of the major threads in literally everything we do as humans, and especially when you're talking about being in an exclusive relationship. So you're talking about sacrifice. Well, I'm listening to you. Couture is listening to me, and vice versa about why I want to drop this money on this, why I need to take this trip, why I want to do this for 3 months. I have to listen. She has to listen. We have to communicate about it. I've got to listen to her reasons why she's bringing these chips to the table and mine for this compromise, right? And these things go hand in hand.
And be willing to share without already believing you know what they're going to say or think, right? Because then that's going to change the whole experience. The track record. But guess what? If it does go wrong, round 2. If it does go wrong, round 3. And you just keep picking the best opportunities to have this conversation. And maybe you need a faster answer than you're being given, but hopefully you can work toward there. But, I want to be clear. It's not just communication, but it's communication with action. It's actually listening and then doing and coming to some type of conclusion or resolve or next steps. Yeah. Because how else are you going to process through the next decision? Yeah.
I want to say this before we get out of here. We got a couple minutes left here. I think one way, because maybe they're listening and like, okay, well, how? Like, how do I get better at it? And I think one way for myself that, I don't know, I'm grateful that it isn't as challenging as I think it could be, is that looking at that optimistic, but really that looking at what they're getting when especially when we talk about that sacrifice, or even that compromise, can help fuel you making that compromise, can help fuel you making that sacrifice. For example, we both have, and Katoya more so than I, but it's been great to see her really these last few months travel more, right, for work, right, for dreams, etc. There's been a level of compromise where, all right, she's at home, kids, more pickup, more fatigue, drop-offs, right? And this last month, you was out here, crushing it, 5 out of 8, something like that in these streets, loved it, right? And
5 out of 8 weeks.
Yeah, it was just some dope. And, right? And so that compromise, I could have easily went to bitterness and entitlement, etc. But I'm being honest, far from perfect, but I was excited. What I'm saying is I was excited about the potential for her. I was excited about, I'm trying to think about her.
Maybe she'll stop complaining.
Right. No, that's not it. But excited for,
she'll be happy.
you know what I'm saying, those things that she was chasing and going after. So if you are wrestling with this, if this is a struggle, and one encouragement is to try to put yourself in a position to be reminded of what they're gaining, what they're after, how is it filling their bucket, and that could be helpful along the way.
No, that's real good. I think kind of trying to process, like my personal opinion is sacrifice may happen, but then also, is this a sacrifice thing or is this a compromise thing? But to try to really think about how do we work to the middle of this? Are we working to the middle of this by way of that person being willing for the sacrifice, or you work together for the compromise? And then lastly, ultimatums are just like a no-go.
No-go.
You can't go right with an ultimatum.
No.
So it's really either somebody's willing to sacrifice or you reach a decided compromise decision. But ultimatum, unless it's top level negative danger zone stuff, if you don't stop doing this, I'm leaving you, that's fair. Because you're cheating, or because some heavy hitters. Other than that, ultimatums in my opinion are just not healthy.
No, 100% agree.
You it's too much power to say you either do this or
what am I, 6?
Yeah. It's just it's not a good way to resolve anything in your relationship, I believe.
Boom. There it is. Man, this was it was good. We said it every time because we mean it every time. But hopefully what it does do, or what it do, whatever that word is, hopefully it brings some good conversation, some good dialogue. It can be a springboard to some healthy chit chat at the house or the car, wherever you are listening to it. But we appreciate you listening or watching on YouTube, wherever you are. So as always, we are grateful for y'all listening. We appreciate that. We've got the summer's coming up as recording this right now, pretty much in June essentially. We're about to hit 100 episodes soon.
Whoop, whoop.
About to hit 2 years soon.
Pull over.
And we're not done, y'all. We got some more coming. Some more leveling up is coming. So we just appreciate y'all. I'm just telling them thank you. I'm being transparent for a moment here. Thank y'all so much along this journey. Anything else before we get out of here? Parting words?
Nah. Peace out, folks.
See you soon.